Various versions of this bill have been floating around Washington for almost the entire decade, first decade of this century, and it's never passed. What happened?
Well, the bill came to a vote in 2007, and we fell a few votes short of the votes necessary to get the bill enacted. But this Congress is a different story. We have a president that supports it. We have a vice president who was a co-sponsor of the bill when he was a senator. We have a head of Department of Homeland Security that supports it, who has spoken out in support of it, both when she was a governor and in her new position at DHS. And every major head of each of the chairmen of the Immigration Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee in the House and Senate all support it. So I think we are in a much better position than we were in 2007.
But everything you just said, all those ducks in a row that you just described, make it even harder to understand why it hasn't passed yet. President Obama has been president for, 21 months now? 20 months? And the DREAM Act seems to be as off the radar screen as it was 22 months ago, in the midst of war and tremendous job losses and all of that.
Yeah, well, we probably disagree on that. I think that the bill has been picking up co-sponsors. It currently has almost 40 co-sponsors in the Senate and has well over 100 in the House. So we've been building support over the last months, and I think Senator Reid, Majority Leader Reid in the Senate has indicated that he plans to move the DREAM Act forward. So I think we're in a very different position. Initially I think that the DREAM Act, we were considering moving the DREAM Act as part of comprehensive immigration reform. Those negotiations were strong at some point, and they seem to have stalled, and now we're looking at pieces of comprehensive immigration reform that can move forward, and the DREAM Act is certainly high on that list.
Roy, as you look at Capitol Hill, as you look at the House and Senate, how do you explain the failure of the DREAM Act, which would take only a tiny bite out of the looming difficult debate over immigration reform? How do you explain its lack of passage?
Well, I think that these kids that are depicted in this film that led into this discussion are somewhat hostages of this larger battle over a large comprehensive immigration reform. I think it's pretty clear that the supporters of CIR did not want the DREAM Act to be voted on during the first year, because they were confident that they could get CIR introduced and voted on and passed. They know that these kids are the most photogenic and compelling cases for amnesty. And if you take that out of CIR, their fear was, I think, that they just wouldn't be able to pass the CIR because you're taking away your most compelling cases. So DREAM Act didn't come up because basically its supporters didn't want it to come up. Now, I don't mean all of its supporters, but a lot of its supporters. And I'll say my organization, Numbers USA, has opposed the DREAM Act, and I know we'll talk more about the specifics later, but and we were probably the lead organization that led the grassroots opposition to defeat it in the Senate in November of 2007. But I think if the DREAM Act had been brought up at the beginning of last year, when President Obama took office, it very well might have passed. There certainly was a fear of our part that it might have. The fact that it was held, as I say, hostage to this larger CIR debate is what's put it in its tough position.
Ade, does Roy have a point that these are among the most sympathetic and easy to understand of all the stories involved in comprehensive immigration reform, and perhaps supporters of the law didn't want to lose that?
They certainly are some of the compelling stories. They are the American story. Students who have come here, who've worked very hard, who've graduated from high school against all the odds, and who have succeeded in going to college, working part-time, raising money from friends, people who've had Facebook fundraisers and have paid for college that way. They are absolutely, kind of the American raise yourself by your bootstraps story. I disagree, though, that, this bill was held hostage by people, including ourselves, who wanted comprehensive immigration reform. I think we were confident. The president indicated that comprehensive immigration reform was going to be one of his priorities. We worked hard to get both Democrats and Republicans to move forward. Senator Graham, Senator Schumer were working on a bipartisan framework. It looked hopeful, and I think both the students and those who work on the DREAM Act hope that we would have once and for all a comprehensive solution to this problem. Unfortunately, those negotiations broke down, and now we're looking to see what else can move.
So, Reina, I think you don't realize how big the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition is until you have kids who are heading to college, and it is a huge number. Do you have some examples to give people an idea of just what a big difference it is?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, you're touching on one of the points that is a major point of the DREAM Act, and that is a point that perhaps my colleague here would disagree with within the DREAM Act, how should the students pay for their college. And we argue, we support the DREAM Act very strongly, and we argue that students that have already been in the state, contributing, or if you will, feeding from, using hospitals, using libraries, et cetera, the state has been paying for them thus far. We argue that then they will contribute after, if they attend in-state college, they receive in-state tuition, they will contribute 10 times what they've already taken from the state. So we make the economic argument that in fact they will contribute by using in-state tuition fees.
But a lot of people who aren't personally involved have children who are fully in status, might not realize that the difference is 100% in many cases. $12,000 if you're a legal resident of the state, $25,000 if you're an out-of-state student. And also, you're not eligible, if you're out of status, for a lot of the normal programs that exist for financing college, right? What are some of those?
Sure. Well, let me actually just raise a point where you just said we believe that the United States education is a basic, fundamental sort of not right, but stable economic stabilizer, and so we believe that that's an opportunity to these children that are here who are more American in some ways than students that or perhaps spend part of their life in France or England, and they've been here their entire life. They did not come here through their choice. Some of them, many of them, have come here as babies. So, let me first make that point. But yeah, so there is, education we feel is something that should be given and is absolutely, without question, should be given to the students here and deserving.